Alrighty, so here we go. It's time to do the preview of the 4th of July holiday weekend games. And as I said before in my last video, there's a bit of a surprise that I want to tell you guys. And the surprise, if of course, if you watched my previous video, you probably have already know that I'm going to be doing a little bit of a Texas road trip this weekend. I'm going to be going to a couple of MLS games. I'm going to be going to this one, watching my Loons play against Dallas to do a little away day. And then, of course, I'll make my way down to Austin to watch this game between Austin versus LAFC, and then it also conclude on Sunday where I'm going to be going to the Gold Cup final between the U.S. versus Mexico. So yeah, crazy weekend for me. Don't ask me why I'm doing this. I guess that's the MLS sicko and also the Gold Cup sicko in me that decided to make this incredible trip. Now, with that being said, because I'm making this trip, that also means that anytime when I am away from home, it is going to be tough for me to try to keep up with these MLS action. The good news is because I'm in Central Time Zone, most likely once this game is over, I might still have a chance to watch both of these games. If not, I'll probably watch this game a lot. And then the same goes after the Austin LAFC game is over, where once this game is over, I get to watch these late night West Coast games that going to happen, and then hopefully I can get to Houston early enough and probably get to the stadium enough where I can also watch this game as well, because this game is going to be taking place right before the Gold Cup final is going to happen between the U.S. versus Mexico. But with that being said, let us begin by first talk about the 4th of July game. So it's a free day kind of match week. This one we have games on Friday, Saturday, and also on Sunday. And starting with the Friday game and the first game of this holiday weekend that doesn't include the one that we just saw between NYCFC versus Toronto is the game that I'm going to. It's FC Dallas versus Minnesota United. This game is also going to be on FS1, which means that yeah, this game, even though they said it's going to kick off at 8:45 p.m. Eastern, 5:45 p.m. Pacific, let's be honest, it's not going to kick off around that time. It's going to kick off at 8:55 p.m. Eastern, 7:55 p.m. Pacific time. Now, in terms of the all-time meetings, 7-6-7 is the all-time meeting. Dallas have a 5-6-8 record coming off of another loss at home, which is a very common theme this season for Dallas. They are one of the worst teams this season when it comes to playing at home, and they're about to face against one of the best team on the road. That is Minnesota United. That is 9-7-4. And what's kind of interesting about Minnesota coming into this one is not only the fact that they're still in the midst of this really tight schedule that they have. They got a lot of games that's going to be playing between now until we have the Leeds Cup break. That is, well, it's a Leeds Cup break, but Minnesota is involving in the Leeds Cup, so it's not really a break for them. They're going to get a lot of games, and the depth is going to be really tested during this stretch. But the good news for Minnesota in this game is that they're going to get most of their starter back because of the Gold Cup. Most of the guys that are missing due to Gold Cup international duty is back on this team, and that includes the Canadian national team. There is going to be a case where Minnesota is going to get their number one goalkeeper, Dave Sinclair. Which man, I'm so happy the fact that we got him back in goal, because yeah, we've been kind of suffering a bit of a goalkeeping crisis with the backup goalkeeper being injured in the last game, and now pretty much potentially would have had a third choice goalkeeper if Canada would have gone deep and make it to the final of the Gold Cup. And most importantly, we also get our most important goal scorer in Taniolo Shai back in this one. Hopefully not to be similar to what we saw last season when Tani had a relatively poor run with the Canadian national team. He kind of fall off the cliff. Hopefully that's not going to be the case again in this one. But either way, this is a game that I do have faith that Minnesota can get something out of this game, especially again when you look at the way that both of these teams is, with Dallas struggling at home this season, and mostly they've been struggling not because of the fact of the lack of goal scoring. It's the defense that's been a big problem for this team. This team have given up a lot of goals in these last couple of games. It started to be very similar to what we saw last season when that was the big issue with this team as well. And you're facing against a Minnesota team that knows how to win on the road, and especially the style that they play perfectly fits what you usually do on the road. Yeah, I am confident that Eric Ramsey's side can get themselves a win on the road in this one, and maybe kind of made up for that game against the Red Bulls where Minnesota should have won that game. They were minutes away from winning that game, and then they went to do their typical thing of dropping points or like they did in the early in the season, and I'm just hoping that's not going to be the case again in this one. Now, moving on, we got Colorado versus Sporting KC. So Colorado, they continue this kind of inconsistent form of play where, last week, yes, they got 4 points out of those two games in a short week span, but you got to say they probably should have got six with the way that they had a 3-0 lead against New England and end up blowing that 3-0 lead. They face against a Sporting KC side that has known a history in terms of coming back from 3-0 deficit. They already did it earlier this season against Minnesota. They have a 5-5-10 record, whereas Colorado has a 7-5-8 record. This game will start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 12-10-10 for both of these teams. And something tells me both of these teams could be right up there near the end of the season, fighting for those last couple of playoff position. Anytime when you have teams that are kind of right on that line in terms of making the playoffs against teams that are below them. Those teams that are below them are going to really look at this like it's a playoff 6 pointer, and I think that's kind of the case for Sporting KC. They're going to view this as a playoff 6 pointer, and we'll see whether or not if Colorado can make sure that they stay their focus. Again, this team has been very inconsistent this year. This Rapids team, there's been times where it's kind of hard to figure out why they perform well in one games, and then the very next game they just doesn't look like the same team whatsoever. So we'll see whether or not if this is going to be a good Colorado side show up in this one, because if it's a bad Colorado side, something tells me Sporting KC maybe get something out of this. And then finally, the last game of the 4th of July game that is a part of the little triple header. I mean, it's not really a triple header because all three of these games is going to overlap because of this one being starting a little later than usual. Is the LA Galaxy versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. Now, on paper, this is an absolute mismatch. I mean, the Galaxy, they're dead last in the standing. They're pretty much almost now on to try to win the wooden spoon. Though obviously Montreal would like to have a word with that. But they're facing against the Whitecaps, who have an 11-5-3 record. And anytime people kind of question of the Whitecaps whether if this incredible run of form that the Whitecaps have had, kind of almost Cinderella like run that they've had with them being second in the standings and going toe to toe with San Diego, and technically they still could actually get first place. They still control their own destiny to get themselves back at the top spot because they do play one game less than San Diego, and I think the gap is only two points. And every time we question, well, maybe it started to kind of turn south with the way that they haven't had a great month of June. They kind of came back down to earth. Then they got a big 1-0 win against LAFC, just to continue to show that Jasper Sorensen's side, no matter all the critics that it's been asked whether the wheels are maybe starting to gonna fall off a little bit, they bounce back and respond in a big way of a big win against LAFC. Now they get to face against the other LA team in this one, and I would say this is a much easier LA team that they're going to be facing because again, it's the Galaxy. I will say that the Galaxy, they haven't been playing that badly lately, and really even doing this horrible run of form that they've been in, only winning one games out of the 20 that they play so far. Some of these games they at least have looked respectable. They have earned some draws in some of these games as well. So they're not really a team that I think, at least in these last month or two, they look like a team that have only won one game this season. There's been some very unlucky kind of games that is kind of the part of the reason where the Galaxy is where they found right now. And as I said, the Galaxy, I don't think this team is going to make the playoffs. They're way too far from making the playoffs. But this is a good opportunity for the Whitecaps. That we talk about Minnesota getting some of those Gold Cup players for the Canadian national team back to action. Well, Vancouver is going to get that boost as well, but unfortunately, they won't get the boost in terms of getting some of the U.S. player that is that they have on their roster that is participating in the Gold Cup, because that U.S. team is going to be playing in Mexico on Sunday against Houston. Now, moving on in terms of talk about the Saturday game. So we got 10 games that's going to be happening on Saturday. We're going to have six that's going to be happening between the 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. Eastern window. So not as much. It is very well balanced, which again, this kind of made me regret that maybe I shouldn't have done this Texas road trip. Consider I do like to watch MLS action on a week that has a well balanced kind of schedule, and this holiday weekend seems like it has that. But the first one, we got Charlotte versus Orlando City. So this game is also going to be on FS1, which means it will start a little bit earlier compared to the other games. 7:15 p.m. Eastern, 4:15 p.m. Pacific. Charlotte, they desperately need a win. I mean, this is a team that is now outside the playoff picture in 10th place with an 8-1-11 record. It has just been a true meltdown and a half that Charlotte has had. The wheels have completely fallen off this team ever since a couple of months when they're at the top of the Eastern Conference. And it doesn't help the fact that, yeah, with them desperately need a win, they have to face against an Orlando City side that is definitely going to be full of confident. Although they did lose their last game, that is, and they're now down to 9-6-5 is their overall record. Now, in terms of the all-time meeting, 5-1-2 in favor of Orlando City. By the way, that loss that Orlando City suffered was against FC Cincinnati in a game where it was a very even game, but unfortunately they just weren't able to be clinical in that one. So they're definitely looking to try to bounce back in this game against the Charlotte side that I'm pretty sure they're happy to be back home. They have not been at home a lot doing this bad run of form, and maybe that's kind of plays part of it because we know this season Charlotte has been really poor this season on the road. They're one of the worst team on the road this season, and that kind of is the reason why you look at this incredible meltdown and incredible tailspin that they've been in for the last 2 months. Why they're in that spot is because they've been playing a lot of road games and they're not winning or even drawing those road games. They keep losing those road games as well. So we'll see whether or not them being back at home, whether the home crowd will give them something to get them all free points, and especially maybe get some revenge against Orlando City because this is also a rematch of last year's first round playoff matchup that we see in the Eastern Conference. Now, moving on, we got Montreal versus Inter Miami. So this is the first of three games that starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. So this is also the first game that Inter Miami is playing ever since have their little Club World Cup adventure ultimately ending in a bit of a whimper with them losing to the European champion PSG in that one. Although I will say this, does Inter Miami consider to be better than Inter Milan now? Consider they only lost 4-0 in this one compared to Inter Milan losing 5-0. You could say they're the more superior Inter team now after only losing to PSG 4-0. But all kidding aside, coming into this game, the good news for them is that they do have a little bit of a favorable game coming back from league play against a lowly Montreal side. I say lowly, but Montreal has played a couple of decent games there and have got a win in the last game at home and finally getting a win at home as well because prior to that win against NYCFC, they had not won a game at Sauce Saputo for over 10 months. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 6-1-4 in favor of Montreal. Montreal is kind of another one of those teams where they always tend to sometimes give Miami some trouble. Now, recently, it hasn't really been the case. Miami has been able to find the answer to beat this Montreal side, and you expect that that's going to be the same case again coming into this one. I mean, I know Miami will be very frustrated of how they end the Club World Cup on a bit of a whimper, even though they did make history of becoming the first MLS team to get into the knockout stage. But yeah, we'll see how they will look now that they're back in league play, whether they can transition that Club World Cup experience and bring that into the league play because it's one thing to go from playing against Paris Saint Germain to now playing against CF Montreal in a span of just 1 week. Now, moving on, we got DC versus Atlanta United. So, would you say this is kind of like either the desperation derby or just kind of the sad derby of the year? I mean, I always say it's kind of the sad derby for a game because it seems like it's a matchup between two teams that are just having a miserable season. I mean, for DC, we know how miserable this season is, and for many, it was kind of expected that this was going to be a miserable season. Nobody expected that for Atlanta United. I mean, this has just been an underachieving season and a half for this Atlanta team, sitting at 4-5-10 right now. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 10-2-7 in favor of Atlanta United. So yeah, and the game between two teams are kind of have some very depressed kind of fan base. I guess this is a matchup that both of these teams they're hoping that maybe one of them can get a win to get themselves back on playoff contention, or maybe just kind of prolong the misery. The fact that hey, we got one win against a bad team. Now, I don't think that's going to change anything. So I guess maybe you could say maybe one of these fan base might hate watch their own team by saying that if we can get a loss in this game, maybe it will be a chance to to have our head coach being fired. In fact, I could say that this could be a game where it could be a desperation derby in terms of both head coaches as well. I mean, both of these head coaches, I'm kind of surprised they're still got a job with their respective club. I mean, for Troy Lesane, he's getting a very long leash for DC United. Consider how bad things have gone for DC, and I just kind of feel like he's really lost the locker room there for DC. And then for Atlanta United, with the way that this team always have high standards and are always put a lot of pressure on their head coach to deliver. They're getting a little longer leash than I thought they would be. By by giving to Ronnie Delia, and especially with the way that he's also another head coach, it doesn't seem like he has the backing of the players. So yeah, in many ways, even though it's kind of like a sad derby for both of these teams, it's maybe a desperation derby for both of these head coaches because whoever loses this game might be out of the job by the end of this game. Now, moving on, we got Cincinnati versus the Chicago Fire. So Cincinnati 12-3-5, whereas Chicago is 8-4-7. And sneakily, this is actually one of the better matchup that we're gonna see during this holiday weekend. Though, as I'll talk about the next matchup, that might be the marquee matchup of this holiday weekend. But Cincinnati have a 6-4-4 record over Chicago. But what's kind of interesting about this game is that you can maybe say that Chicago might be the favorites coming in this one. And I know it sounds crazy to say because Cincinnati actually has played relatively well. It feels like they got back on track in these last couple of games under Pat Nolan. But the problem for Cincinnati this season is the fact that they've had their struggles this season at home. And they're facing against literally one of the best road team that is the Chicago Fire. The Chicago Fire is night and day when it comes to playing on the road compared to playing at home. At home this season, they have had their struggle, but on the road, they are an absolute juggernaut this season. And I'm pretty sure Greg Berhalter's side is going to try to do the same thing in this one. So yeah, it's not very often I say the team that I think is the favorites have a much worse record compared to the underdog. But again, for Cincinnati with the road or the home struggle that they have this season, do not be surprised if Chicago can pull it off. Chicago have shown that they've been able to go on the road and especially go on the road against very tough teams and able to pull out a victory as a resort. So we'll see whether or not that's going to be the case in this game between them and Cincinnati. Now, moving on to probably the marquee matchup of this week. So this is a game that could have easily been a stand alone game and maybe even a Sunday night soccer game if flex schedule actually exists in MLS. But it's Nashville versus the Philadelphia Union. This was supposed to be the battle between the top two teams, but Cincinnati, of course, had that second position. But it is a battle between two really, really good teams. And I would say for the Philadelphia Union, they're now in the midst of a little bit of a tough schedule and kind of in a stretch where this is kind of almost like a prove it kind of schedule that the Union have now that they're facing against really the biggest competition that they're going to be and that they want to consider themselves an Eastern Conference contender and stay up at the top of the Eastern Conference. They need to win against these kind of team that is Nashville SC, and it's not going to be easy whatsoever. I mean, Nashville right now, they're the hottest team in MLS right now. They have the longest unbeaten run. They have not lost a game in over 2 months. They have an 11 game unbeaten run, which is the longest active unbeaten run out of any team, and they have an 11-5-4 record, whereas the Union have a 12-4-4 record. And in terms of the all-time meeting, 4-3-2 in favor of the Philadelphia Union. And yeah, it's a shame the fact that this game is actually happening at the same time as I'll talk about the next game that I'm going to be attending because yeah, this could be a mouth watering game, and that this is going to be the second week in a row the Union are going to be involved in a game that is going to be a very marquee matchup. And again, last week against Columbus, I thought they played well against Columbus in this one. They really gone toe to toe with Columbus, but the problem is they just couldn't really find that attacking threat that they needed to. And in this game, that they're gonna have to do the same thing because again, this national team they are just red hot right now, both on the attack and on the defensive front. And the Union is gonna have their hands full in terms of trying to stop Sam Surridge and Honey Mukhtar. Those two guys are just playing an MVP level, doing this unbeaten run. Now, moving on into the last game, and this is the game that I'm going to be going in terms of being the 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific start, and that of course is Austin versus LAFC. So Austin, of course, they have a 7-5-8 record, and LAFC have a 7-5-5 record. It's kind of crazy the fact that both of these teams is actually not that far uh, from each other, and both of these teams are kind of lower than where I thought they would be in the standings. Now, a lot of that is due to the fact that for Austin this season, they've been kind of going for a bit of a roller coaster this season. They have had some good run of form, and then they just have some bad run of form, and then now they had some good run of form, and now in the last game, it feels like they took a step back following a loss, and now they're facing against an LAFC side that we talk about this season. One of the biggest problem for LAFC this year is that they simply cannot win on the road. I mean, the road form has been miserable for LAFC, and that's kind of a little unheard of because LAFC has been one of the best road team in the league. I mean, we talk about them being very good at home as well, and they're still pretty good at home, even though they're coming off that 1-0 loss against Vancouver. but it's a role for them that they need to figure it out. If they want to get themselves back up in the standings, and there's still a chance to do so because when you look at the amount of games that they play, they are playing some of the fewest amount of games. So if they do win those games in hand, they can definitely rise up in the standings. But the problem is some of those games in hand is on the road, and like I said, the road form has been a huge issue for this LAFC side. So we'll see whether they can figure things out. And also, I don't expect there's going to be a lot of goal in this game. And anytime when you watch an Austin game, do not expect there's going to be a lot of goals. They're going to play the style that they like to do, which is that grind out kind of resort. But either way, I'm going to be definitely excited to go to this game. I actually got club seats tickets for this one, so I'm definitely upgrading myself, treating myself to do a little bit of a VIP experience in this one, sitting in the club section and watching this one in full as well. The only thing I'm also hoping is the fact that it's not going to be incredibly hot. I mean, that's kind of the one thing that I'm gonna have to battle when it comes to going to Texas. Although this game between Dallas and Minnesota, I did check the weather. The weather actually is not bad in terms of the game. I think they said that the temperature is gonna be only in the low 80s, which is pretty cooler than expected. I usually expect for a Texas weather, and then this game I think the temperature is gonna be in the upper 80s, which is not bad. I mean that's pretty normal for or at least pretty close to being normal, maybe a little bit below normal than what you usually get with Austin game in July. But still, it's gonna be a hot one, and that if the club section does have a way where I can actually see the game from indoor, I'll probably maybe do that instead of watching the game from the seat. Now, moving on to the Saturday late night game and looking at some of the Sunday game, we start off with RSL versus St. Louis City. So you could say this is also another matchup that's kind of like a sad derby or a desperation derby between two really mid team right now in the Western Conference, two teams that's below the red line. RSL have a 5-4-10 record. They did get a win in the last game, which was a much needed that win. Or actually, no, they didn't. They didn't get a win in the last game, if I'm not mistaken. They actually got a draw on the road against Sporting KC. They're facing against a St. Louis side that, yeah, it's safe to say that Dave Critchley Magic only worked for one game because they're now back to being a team that is pretty bad right now. They have a free 6-11 record. This game starts at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 2-1-1 in favor of RSL. So I don't know. Again, just like the DC and Atlanta game, I don't know a win in this game might move a needle for both of these teams. Maybe for RSL because I think RSL is closer in terms of where they are to try to get themselves into the playoffs. St. Louis are just way off the standings. It just feels like they might need to make another big summer. Maybe make some signings to really rejuvenate this team because unfortunately the formula of them trying to get a new term head coach after firing their main head coach. That formula didn't seem like it's working out this year compared to what we saw last season when they went in an incredible run of form in the second half of the season, but just kind of fell short because they dug themselves way too deep into a hole. Now, moving on, we got the San Jose Earthquakes versus the New York Red Bulls. So the Quakes are back in their confines at PayPal Park. It's good to fact that they, of course, are back at PayPal Park. I've also have heard people said that do the Quakes still want to play Cali Classico game at Stamford Stadium because I feel like the one thing that it's now started to become where I've hear some of the fan base saying that games probably shouldn't be playing at Stamford Stadium anymore at Cali Classico mainly because that kind of novelty and that kind of just prestige and almost that big game kind of atmosphere that we've seen with Stanford game at Cal Clasico, it just feels like it's completely wearing off. Consider the last couple of games, one, the Quakes haven't been able to get the win at Stanford for those Cali Clasico, but also just the fact that you don't have like those late heroic goals that kind of makes those Stanford's game very magical. And I think I also heard somebody say in the last game that I think the main reason why the Quakes really struggle against the Galaxy in this one is because the field at Stanford Stadium is so narrow, and this is a team that likes to play a very expanded kind of style of soccer. That's kind of what Bruce Arena always like to do with his team. And when you play on a narrow pitch like that, it's no surprise that the Quakes are really kind of handcuffed themselves because of it. Now, as I said, the good news is they're back at home. They're facing against a Red Bulls team that, as I mentioned with teams that struggle on the road, they're one of those teams that have struggled on the road this season. This team has not got a lot of wins on the road. In fact, I think they only won like once so far this season on the road. They have an 8-5-7 record. They're just above the red line. The Quakes are also another team that is also just above the red line. So this is a kind of a big game for both of these teams with the way that, with them just kind of being hover around the red line, they want to get a big win to get themselves further away from the red line. But in terms of the all-time meeting, yeah, the Quakes have not had some success against the Red Bulls recently. 8-4-3 is the record. The Red Bulls has had the Quakes number in recent time, but hopefully this one might change. And especially, for the Quakes, after that disappointing draw against the Galaxy, I know that they can be better than what they did against the Galaxy. I have a feeling that, that was definitely a bad game for their standards, but now they're playing back at their home venue and playing in a more familiar ground and with the way that they're allowed to have space to operate compared to playing on a narrow pitch like they did at Stanford Stadium. I would expect the Quakes should have a bounce back performance here against the Red Bull side. That it's kind of interesting that the Red Bulls are for the second week in a row are playing against my favorite team. I don't think that's a thing that I've seen happen often where one of these MLS team gets to face against my two favorite team back to back weeks. Now, moving on to the first of three games that starts at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the second game that is. This is the first of three that is. But the second one is San Diego versus the Houston Dynamo. So again, on paper, this game looked like it's a mismatch. San Diego, they are one of the hottest team right now, if not the hottest team right now in the Western Conference with 12-3-5 record. The Dynamo have a 6-5-9 record. This is the first ever meeting between both of these teams. And again, on paper, this looks like a complete mismatch. This looks like San Diego should get an easy win in this one against a Dynamo team that, yes, they did get a win in the last game to kind of stop the bleeding a little bit. But let's be honest, this is a Dynamo team that have not been in a relatively good form. And one of the biggest problems for this team doing this bad run of form is that they can't keep the ball out of the back of the net. The last game was really one of the first time that they able to keep it 0 on the score sheet. But again, that last game that they were able to keep a 0 on the score sheet was against St. Louis, which is one of the worst attacking team in the league this season. They're about to face against probably one of the best attacking teams this season in San Diego FC. So yeah, there's not really too much hope. The fact that Houston can get something out of this game, and with San Diego being both good at home and on road this season, and just look like a well-drilled machine, you would expect they should be able to get the easy 3 points in this game. Now, moving on, we got the Portland Timbers versus the New England Revolution. So we got another matchup that is an interconference matchup, a matchup that we don't usually see very often. The Timbers with an 8-6-5 record. New England, a perfect balance, 6 wins, 6 draw, and 6 losses so far into this season. Now, in terms of the all-time meeting, this is where it gets interesting because it feels like anytime when both of these teams play against each other, it's going to be a draw because 13 meetings that both of these teams have faced off against each other, or I'm sorry, it's not 13, it's actually 11 meetings that both of these teams have faced, has all ended in a draw, with the Timbers getting the 2 win over the 1 win that the New England Revolution has had. So, yeah, with the way that the history have said that it seems like this game has to end in a draw, most likely this game could potentially end in a draw. Though I would say that this is also kind of a game where both of these teams definitely wants to bounce back coming into this one and getting themselves a win. I mean, for the Portland Timbers, they easily want to bounce back after playing probably the worst that they played this season against Toronto FC. Just recently last weekend. Whereas New England, they themselves want to bounce back because these last couple of games they started to stop winning again and are starting to drop down the standings as a result. The momentum that they built back in May is started to slowly come to a grinding halt, and we'll see whether or not if New England can find that mojo again against the Timber side. That well, I'll say the one thing about this Portland Timber side, I feel like they're now once again in that typical kind of problem that you get with a Phil Neville side. A Phil Neville side will always have time where when winnings are they're winning a lot of games, and when the team is feeling hot, yeah, they're gonna sustain for a couple of games. But when things start to go south and when they start to experience some losing, that's when things can go really south. I think the Timbers are kind of experienced that. They haven't really been playing well in these last couple of games, and now it's up to them to try to see if they can snap out of this funk. Especially like I said, coming off of easily the worst performance that they play in the last game against Toronto FC. And then finally, the last game, which is the Sunday night soccer showcase game, we get another good one, and it's also the second consecutive week where the Columbus Crew make their appearance on Sunday night soccer. They, of course, this time will go on the road to face against the Seattle Sounders. It's a rematch of the COVID MLS Cup that we saw between both of these teams in 2020. Seattle 8-5-6 is their record. Columbus is 10-7-3, and this is a bit of an early start. For a game that is dubbed as Sunday Night Soccer. I mean, it's not really Sunday Night Soccer when the game starts at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, especially the game is kicking off in daylight. So a little bit misleading in terms of the title of being Sunday Night Soccer. But again, I know why they decided to start this game early. They simply cannot play this game right between where the Gold Cup is happening. And also, this is also kind of why I'm kind of surprised the fact that usually with the Gold Cup, they usually start a little bit later than expected. This year, I feel like they started a little bit sooner than they expected. Usually with the Gold Cup, I think they usually start the game like around 9 p.m. Eastern. They probably could have put this game at 7 p.m. Eastern and then have the Gold Cup starting at 9 p.m. Eastern as well. But I guess maybe this year they want to push it a little bit early because on a Sunday like this, when you try to have a game at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I know this is the 4th of July weekend, but not a lot of people is going to try to tune in, especially in the East Coast that starts at 9 p.m. Eastern compared to a more favorable 7 p.m. Eastern start. And I actually do like the earlier start as well because that does give me a chance that after when I finish going to the Gold Cup final, I can actually make the drive back to Austin. And yes, I'm actually going to be staying 2 night in Austin. I'm actually not going to be staying overnight in Houston. And I know you might think I'm crazy because the distance between Austin and Houston is not that short, but still, I think it's still manageable. That that World Cup final game at the very latest, I would say it might end around like 8:30 or 9 o'clock if there is extra time, and I maybe could be able to get back to Austin on that Sunday day night, probably close to before for midnight. That is, but yeah, like I said, this game has to start before the Gold Cup final, and it's a great appetizer too before the Gold Cup final because again, this is a good matchup between two teams that definitely has aspiration of making MLS Cup. For the Seattle Sounders, they did get a big win in the last game against Austin, and they're facing against a Columbus side that, just like Cincinnati, it seems like these two Ohio team is definitely heating up with the weather now started to be heating up again in the summer. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my preview of all of these match week number 22 games during the holiday weekend of the 4th of July. And like I said, it's going to be tough for me to try to do the review of some of these games, especially keep an eye on some of these games. I'll most likely do the review of the 4th of July game after when I went finish watching this game, and it's going to be relatively late too because again, me being in Central Time Zone, this means that this game is not going to finish until close to midnight. And then, of course, I'll probably do part one of the review after when I attended this one, and then I'll probably finish the rest of these not on Sunday night, but instead probably I'll do part two of the review. I'm probably also gonna do the. Could I maybe do the review of the Gold Cup final? It is. I think I probably should do that as well because after all, it is USA versus Mexico, and that and whenever that is the case, and especially in a cup final like this, I'm gonna try to do a review myself. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.